Hello everyone, how are we doing today? There's no energy in the room. I think we should wait till we get a big round of applause for our August panel. Guys, get some energy in the room. More. These guys have come all the way. Dr. Mehta here has come from Pune and so many other places. So, yeah, I think, we really want to talk about the future of the world in some sense, right? Because as we all know, passenger vehicles or, even four-wheelers are one of the key contributors for greenhouse gases. And for the future of the world, I think it's very important that we figure out a sustainable way of mobility. So the topic is very interesting, and to be honest, I've been talking about this topic for the last 10 years, but never ever have I seen the kind of momentum that we are seeing now in terms of actual adoption and the kind of issues that we were talking about, while they are kind of similar, like range anxiety, or for that matter, the cost issue, or how are we going to fund it. Those issues are similar, but we are, to the next level of detail. We've figured out, the most basic pieces, and now we are getting into, more nuanced problems. And let me just give a opening comment, and then I think we have a very solid panel of practitioners who are in the industry, who are facing challenges day in, day out on how to make this work. So we'll hear from them. And we want to make this session very, very interactive. So we want to make sure we have enough time for the Q&A. And I was just informed that we should try and, shorten this session a little bit. So it may be about 45, 50 minutes. So I'm going to go a little bit faster in terms of, our own views and have enough time for Q&A. So let me just portray the bigger picture here. Adoption of electric mobility at a mass level in four-wheelers, is already happening, as we are seeing. And Akshay earlier was mentioning, right, that he came here in a Blue Smart vehicle, which was BYD brand. Yeah, so it was quite a strange coincidence. And you are probably going to go back in Pinnacle Mobility Solution. We'll arrange that for you. But I think the key point is we are seeing and touching and feeling, electrification of four-wheelers now as we speak. But what are the main issues that we are dealing with? Let me call them out, and then I will get the panelists to talk more about it. First and foremost, from a customer standpoint, yes, the cost is still higher. But clearly, if you are riding more than 100 kilometers, 150 kilometers a day, then it makes economic sense. But still, if you are riding shorter distance, then the initial cost is much higher. The second issue, I still have concerns about how am I going to charge it, and range anxiety, as it's called, right? What if I have to go long distance one day and my battery conks off, or I run out of battery? How do I run that? The third piece, which also I think is quite crucial, is financing. Because this is a new area, as we were discussing earlier. There is always a challenge in the minds of the financiers, that how much do I finance, and what should be the right interest rate? How do I factor in the risk that's involved in not knowing what will be the resale price of the asset? The fourth piece is about regulation. While a lot of it at the central level has been addressed, I believe, but still when you bring it down to state and individual cities, when you have to register an electric vehicle, there is not enough standardization, I would say, and it's getting better, but still some work to be done. The last point that I want to say is what are some of the creative business models that one can look at for mass adoption. Because unless this goes beyond fleets into ordinary customers who believe that they should go for an EV, not just because it's a novelty product, or not just because it meets their economic rationale, but it makes sense for them, and they like those models. There are enough choices, and because in our country, riding vehicles is also about personal preference and a status symbol, especially in passenger vehicles. Similarly, in commercial vehicles, it's a business rationale where the EV story is relatively clearer now. So with those opening comments, I want to first begin with, Dr. Mehta here. So let's talk about, the whole commercial vehicle dimension, right? And you've been in this space for many years. You've written extensively about it. What do you think are some of the key issues on the ground that you are still facing for mass adoption?
Sure. So thank you. I think let me start with the opportunity first rather than the challenge. And I think for all the people here in this room, probably the most important question is, what is the opportunity for all of this landscape? And I think it's a fantastic opportunity. This is a once in 100-year opportunity. If you put the automotive industry in perspective, it's the largest manufacturing industry in the country, in the world. We are about 35% of manufacturing in India. We employ the maximum number of people. And I think for a long time to come, since the IT boom, India was looking for a sector which would produce probably the maximum innovation, the maximum growth, and maximum jobs. And I think this is what the EV ecosystem will do for the country. So if you take a 10-year view, I don't think one in the EV industry, one can take a month-to-month or a quarter-to-quarter view. You have to, don't get into this if you're looking for change within the next 1 month. But over a 10-year perspective, I'm at least very clear that outside of China, we will be the largest EV market in the world. And where does that bring opportunities? That brings opportunities as an OEM, that brings opportunities as part of the ecosystem, whether it's dealers, suppliers, etc. And of course, part of the ultimate ecosystem, whether it is batteries, whether it's charging systems, whether it is all of this that comes into it. And I think the second thing we should look at, and this is normally not spoken enough, is this is not just an opportunity to sell in India. This is an opportunity to sell to the world. Today, China is 95-98% of the EV market of the world. And they are exporting to many countries. And everywhere in the world, there is a requirement for a China plus one. So people are looking for alternatives to China. So that's the opportunity that all of us have in the EV industry. And now, maybe I'll spend a minute to speak about commercial vehicles. Commercial EVs obviously make the most sense because EVs make sense the more you use. This is the total cost of ownership makes sense the more you use an EV. And typically a car is used 5% of the time, except if it's in fleets or any of the other things. So if you're using a two-wheeler, if you're using a four-wheeler, if you're using a bus, the business case will make sense first. So this is why the adaptation will happen first in all of these use cases. Now, given all of this, I think we are moving towards something which is absolutely historic. I mean, I'll give you, again, sometimes we always look at the challenges of our country, but look at the opportunity. For all the hype and all the talk, and I'm sorry to put it so bluntly, Europe has been talking about sustainability for such a long time. What's the size of the electric bus industry? 3,000 buses last year. Has been plus minus 5% for the last 15 years. The largest manufacturer in Europe for buses makes 300, 400 buses a year. And what are we talking about in India this year? From April of this year, we had 3,000 electric buses all over the country. This year, probably we'll have tenders for, well, the next one for 50 is coming. Even if you don't take 50, it will be at least 15,000 buses which will get tendered out in India this year. So that's the size and scale of this opportunity which is happening. And I think, personally, this is a huge, huge opportunity for everybody in this room, really to look at new sectors, new opportunities, and the glass is half full or even much more than that here.
Oh, absolutely. I thought I covered the opportunities piece, and I assume that everybody knows about it, but thanks for bringing it up. Let me now move to Sanjay. Sanjay, of course, is with BYD, and of course, you may be interacting quite a bit with your colleagues in China, and you know how the story has panned out in India. How do you see the passenger vehicle mass adoption? And, of course, the good thing about passenger vehicles, it's volumes plus value, So if the mass adoption happens in passenger vehicles, you are really going to see, the industry grow multifold, So what are you seeing from your lens?
Thanks, Kavan. I think Dr. Sudhir made a very, very good point about, you have to always look at long term. You cannot look at short term. I think that's the first point, even in passenger vehicles. So when I interact with my BYD headquarter team, they always look at long term. India is a big market. I think we are the 5th largest passenger vehicle market in the world. And by 2030, we are going to be the 3rd or the 4th largest passenger vehicle market, which means we'll be selling almost 5 million vehicles if everything goes fine. 5 million vehicles we'll be selling in India, passenger vehicles, by 2030. That's the projection from the current 3.2 million, which we had turned last year. So even if what estimates that people are putting up is on a pessimistic side, it might be around 8 to 10% of the total population will be electric. But most of the OEMs are also optimistic because the way it is happening in the last 2 years. I think in FY 2021 we sold 4,000 vehicles, all manufacturers, electric vehicles. In 2022, I think it went up to 20,000 vehicles. This year, already first half, it's already crossed 35,000. The way we are happening, 30,000 almost. So I think the way it is happening, we are hopeful that 15 to 20% is an optimistic projection of passenger vehicle adoption. Of course, there are challenges which we always face. One is the initial cost of acquisition, and then as Sudhir rightly told, the more you use it, the TCO becomes more viable, even for personal use. The second is the infrastructure. People always have a fear that if I buy this vehicle, can I go so many kilometers? If I go out of Delhi or Mumbai, will I have the charging infrastructure? That is slowly changing. I think the last 6 months, it is changing. And I think in southern part of India, it has been changing very fast. You have a lot of public charging infrastructure which is coming up. I think that challenge is getting solved. So hopefully over the next 3-4 years with all OEMs, with all new startups coming in charging infrastructure, I think that problem should get solved. And I think the final challenge, or you can say opportunity, is that when you have, now currently only one OEM is producing electric vehicles below 20 lakhs. Rest, most of them are above 20 lakhs. So once you have a electric vehicle in the range between 10 to 20 lakhs, then I think the mass adoption will start happening. So all the OEMs, once they start localizing and manufacturing, I think that will start happening. Then we can see a faster adoption, because that is the sweet spot, 10 to 20 lakhs. You will not have electric vehicles below 10 lakhs. It's very difficult. Between 10 to 20 lakhs, that is what is going to happen. Because if you take the case of SUV, the SUV segment, people, hatchback was predominantly in the passenger vehicle IC segment. I think hatchback was predominantly almost 50%, 60% for the last 20 years or so. Last 3 years, SUV has taken over that. Today, SUV occupies 43% of the total passenger vehicle market. That's a huge jump. People are not buying hatchbacks. So they are straight away going into SUVs, around 10 lakhs, because it's affordable. It is much more, stylish. So instead of buying a 7-8 lakh hatchback, let me just put more money and buy a SUV straight away. So that's the kind of, attraction which has happened to SUV. Globally, people were estimating, globally, SUV segment is only 32 to 35% of matured markets. So India, it has already touched 43%. So everybody is surprised how this can happen. So once we, as Sudhir rightly said, once Indians start adopting some technology, it's very fast. Same thing which happened in mobile smartphones. So I think all OEMs are hopeful that yes, 15 to 20% by 2030, which will be a big market. We will be the second largest EV market after China. So that's what my take is.
Fantastic points, Sanjay. Especially, the point that between the 10 to 20 lakh band, we need a lot more choices available as well. Because, when you have performance with choice, I think that's where mass adoption will trigger in. So let me now move to you, Akshay. Battery is really the heart of the vehicle, right? The range problem, the performance problem, all that gets addressed if you have the right battery. So in some sense, it's also, fantastic opportunity if you get it right. So what are you seeing? Lithium ion is, center stage now, but there are other alternatives as well. do you see any, disruptive technology coming in which will almost like match the price of, ICE? And then, of course, that's, the inflection point, even if we bring it down to 10% price difference. So your views, please.
So I think when we compare any sustainable technology, whether it is related to EV, batteries, solar, renewable energy, anything, right? All sustainable technologies have a very clear TCO math that works out. It's the challenge of upfront cost, right? If you look at the solar industry, obviously the upfront cost of putting it up is quite cumbersome, but the generation cost today is as low as 2 rupees a unit of electricity, right? Same with electric vehicle TCO, right? If you have enough utilization, particularly on commercial fleets, then the per kilometer cost can be 30–40% cheaper than your fossil fuel based vehicle. So I think while it is a technology play, it is also a financial engineering play, is the way I look at it. So as much as it is responsibility of technologists like us to kind of come up with better solutions, similarly the financing ecosystem has to come together and offer more and more innovative solutions in that sense. Now coming to the scenario of range, anxiety, charging and all of those things. See, personal mobility user is very spoiled, right? We are not in 1940s, 50s where the automotive industry is just picking up and technologies are yet to evolve, right? We already have been using the most efficient fossil fuel based cars, all the features packed in. And therefore, now you cannot say that just because we are having a EV transition, we can start with something which is subpar or suboptimal. And that's the reason these challenges of range anxiety, where would I charge it, how long will it take to charge, and all of these things are in the picture. And that's the reason you see a lot of adoption happening in the commercial space. Because there are fixed routes, more predictable, you can deploy charging infrastructure more predictably. And once the charging infra comes up, then it doesn't matter whether a commercial user is using it or a personal user is using it. At the same time, for personal mobility, it is very, very important to have a robust grid which can allow you to have destination charging. Without destination charging, penetration of passenger electric vehicle mobility will be very, very truncated. I can tell you a very clear example. I come from the industry. My office will have hundreds of engineers working on EVs. And I got a charger installed at my home. The power went off on the first day. Right? So imagine a normal customer getting a slow charger. And it's not like a fast charger. It's a slow charger which is being installed. So that's the level of electric grid infra that we have in general. Right? So what we don't realize is that even slow charging of a passenger car or a four-wheeler, like a car in that sense, it is equivalent in amount of power to at least 2 to 3 air conditioners. We don't put that in perspective. Right? You don't go around plugging in an air conditioner into a mobile phone socket. You just don't do that. But when somebody is coming up and setting up a slow charger, because the term slow is there, they are like, you can put it anywhere and you can charge your car. So that is one of the key challenges, or so to say, opportunity that Dr. Mehta was saying, that we need to make sure that we have enough and robust infrastructure for destination charging, without which there is no way personal mobility on EVs can be successful. Coming to range, again, more and more advanced battery technologies are coming up. We are packing more and more range. BYD itself has been at the forefront in terms of coming out with blade batteries, for example, packing in very high energy density cells. We ourselves are pushing forward for more and more range, faster and faster charging. But again, if you start with commercial mobility, you have fixed routes, you have fixed destinations. Then you can have rapid charging, fast charging coming in and manage those routes. And then eventually, as technologies improve, as charging infra improve, you can target to have more and more distances being covered on the electric vehicles itself. So that's my overall take on the opportunities and challenges.
Great points, Akshay. So let me now move to a user perspective. Anirudh, you have a fleet of almost 2,000 plus EVs. So you have the real experience of of EV and how it's working. And so your perspective, see, because one thing, like he very rightly mentioned, the commercial case as far as fleet applications is pretty much proven, right? I think that is perfectly fine. But how do you push mass adoption? And I think that's really the question. And of course, some of your competitors, yourself will scale up. but it will still not take us to like 10% or 15% of the market, that Sanjay talked about. And of course, eventually the goal is much higher. So what do you think needs to be done from a mass adoption standpoint? Yeah.
Right. No, thanks. So I think very interesting question. So yeah, at BlueSmart, so we operate 2,000 odd electric vehicles, right? And it's a 100% electric fleet. Now, I think what fleets are able to provide and what fleets will be able to provide in, bringing this mass adoption of EVs in the country, fall under two major heads, right? One is the head where you're talking about the total cost of ownership of, for fleets, even today, makes sense for, adopting these vehicles which have a higher upfront ownership cost because of, you're running more kilometers per day and therefore your operational costs are like minuscule compared to your, ICE competitors. And, that actually, brings in positive unit economics and so on and so forth. And therefore, fleets can become, and are becoming the anchor adopters for EVs in the country, upfront. And that's why OEMs also are looking to fleets for, this kind of anchor adoption. Now, this is the most obvious benefit, but then there are other, ancillary benefits that happen here as well. Now, some of the things that, for example, what a fleet could provide, to OEMs is just the ability to run these vehicles at scale and actually test the product out, right? Now, and this also connects to the point that, Akshay was earlier making on financial engineering as well, because from a finance standpoint, you would need more data on these vehicles to actually build in those, what could I build in as residual value for these vehicles, and then how could I structure my financing product, and so on and so forth. And for that, you would need data on how far do these vehicles run, what type of battery degradation do you see over, periods of time, what do you see it over temperature, what kind of geographies can you run it in, are there any risks associated with the product, etc., etc. And if you're waiting for the personal mobility segment, the passenger, the direct retail consumers to run these cars, you're going to wait for a much longer period of time to get that kind of data, which fleets can provide at a much more rapid scale just because of the, number of kilometers they're running, and also because of the TCO, they're also having more vehicles, right? So it's just the multiplication of the number of vehicles they have and the number of kilometers each of these vehicles run per day, which is disproportionately higher today for fleets than for, retail consumers. So from that standpoint, it's a massive benefit for OEMs to actually, have much shorter product development cycles and, actually start building better and better products until a point where it becomes, much more favorable for retail consumers to buy these products, right? So fleets are also, fortunately, slightly more tolerant to slight product errors or, suboptimal, product deployments than the unforgiving retail customer is, right? I mean, they are like completely unforgiving, as, we said, right? So with fleets, you can, still, I mean, I'm not advocating that please, send poor products to fleets, but there is some higher level of forgiveness there, and that tolerance allows OEMs to actually build better and better products, and and ultimately the fleet benefits from this. So that's from the fleet standpoint how it helps, right? Now from the retail consumer standpoint also there is a massive benefit when fleets become these early adopters. I mean, I can tell you from personal experience that BlueSmart is the first point where a user experiences an EV for a massive number of customers in Gurgaon, right? They have never taken a ride in an EV, and you would have all these concerns of range anxiety and, what is this, how do you charge, so on and so forth. But, you download an app, you take a trip, and you have maybe a conversation with a driver partner now and then you ask them that, आप कैसे charge करते हो, and how do you charge your car, are there problems in this car, etc., etc. You get a first-hand perspective from someone who's actually driving these cars as to what are the benefits, what are the challenges as of now, how is it getting solved, etc., etc. Right? So this actually breaks the ice. So it helps people cross the barrier from, an unknown creature that is the EV to actually a familiar creature that I'm anyway taking daily. Now should I buy the product, right? It's that choice. So that step becomes easier, and therefore you are one step closer to mass adoption, right? And further, the final point I would make from the consumer standpoint is that every EV that is sold to a fleet, especially a passenger fleet, B2C facing fleet like us, it provides access to a disproportionate number of customers to access that EV. When you sell to a retail consumer, that one retail consumer and their family experiences it. But every single car sold to a fleet could probably impact like maybe 50 customers every month, right? So that suddenly creates this massification of, EV, both share of mind as well as, the share of experience, which actually helps the entire growth. So I think that's what I would want to add.
Oh, fantastic point. So we are looking at fleets not just as a catalyst, but also a test bed for EV technology and exposing, also like an evangelist for the EV revolution in some sense. So maybe there's another business model rather than beyond flying taxis, you can also, generate data and monetize it. So I'll
Traveling
have a
in,
separate meeting with you to tell you how PwC can help in that journey. Yeah, sorry.
Traveling, just to add to what Anirudh was saying, traveling in Blue Smart, I realized that BYD has the highest leg space.
Oh, so he is propagating two brands at the same time. So that sounds good. So let me now move to Vinkesh ji, the man who knows how the Indian customer behaves and will tell you what will work in India and what won't. But really, I think, the customers have also evolved and you've seen that journey. What do you see is, the customer's reaction to EV, and how do you see this panning out, especially the mass adoption?
So, thanks, Kavan. Before giving you the answer, I should thank Sanjay ji. I am now very positive on dealerships in future. 5.5 million in another some years, that's a big opportunity for us. Sudhir ji also showed us what's opportunity of growth we are looking forward in future CVs also. Even if we see 15%, I feel it comes down to some 8 lakh passenger vehicle in EV in some 7-8 years. That's a really great numbers, really great numbers. No doubt, I feel the PLI will help in supporting from the production side, but dealers will surely benefit with all those things. Just a small, Volvo just launched Volvo XC40. The on-road price of XC40 ICE is around 54. No, the electric vehicle price is 55, which means on-road electric would be 58 or 60, and the ICE would be 55, which means there's only a 10% price gap, which is very, very less as compared to when we were talking of EV having at least double the price or 50% up. But the flip side is they are only giving 150 vehicles to India. That's the biggest flip side. And that is where my point is coming in. No doubt the opportunities are huge, huge. But do you practically know how many passenger vehicle dealers sell an electric vehicle car in India? It's lower than 3%. So even if I talk about the only manufacturer who is openly into market in EV, which is Tata, only 25% of their dealers have EV in their showroom. 75% don't have. BYD has 7 or 800% have it. That's their positive point. If you talk of Hyundai also, the similar. They sell very less number. Talk of MG, similar. So when we talk of EV passenger vehicle, I'm not including commercial vehicle because commercial vehicle majorly are direct to government. Private, very less, I don't know, maybe minuscule percentage would be buying. But if I talk of mass adoption, in commercial vehicle is easy, it depends how much government wants to spend, how much wants. It can be done overnight, it can be done maybe 50 years, 10 years, whatever. But if you talk of a normal customer, as of today, he doesn't have an option to buy a car, electric vehicle car. Leave apart some 20 or 30 districts in India, which has some more than 1,000 districts. Our Indian auto industry is based, or you can say flourishes on Bharat, which is rural India, where electric vehicles are not there. Till the time we have all the dealers, or at least 70% plus dealers selling electric vehicle cars, I don't see any adoption happening. I may be the misfit in this panel, maybe in this hall also. 10%, 15%, we can reach 30% also by 2030. Tata has announced, even MG has announced 30%, 25, 30% in 2030. But with these two players who actually do 20% of the total passenger vehicle, if even they reach 20, 30%, it will not affect the total industry. We need more players to come in. Mahindra is announcing, the announcement is just around the corner. The biggest player is still MUM. They are avoiding this discussion whenever it happens. The number 2 Hyundai is also not given any clear, everybody is talking. I feel this has become a fad for a customer to buy also. I have an EV to tell, but he normally is buying an EV and traveling in something else. I am not talking about people like him, but in general. So I get a lot of inquiries, and when we talk about should I buy a Nexon, I said, you travel in a 7 Series. Why do you want a Nexon? अरे वो घर के लिए चाहिए ना, वो थोड़ा सा driver. So practically it's a fad owning an EV, and this happens. The early adopters for any new technology is like that. So we'll see some, then when it starts selling as a practical use, then वो आता है कितना देती है क्या. ये range anxiety practically in the car segment as of today, it's not big. It's big to talk about. As of today, even a Nexon, not today's Nexon, the 150 kilometer or that type of Nexon was still selling, and customers were happy. And frankly, when we talk about Delhi, Bombay, Calcutta, there are issues, landlord, tenant, apartments, parking space having charging. But we sell around 3 lakh cars in a month. Out of those 3 lakh cars, 2 lakh cars goes to a person who owns a bungalow or a house. He is not living in a tenant rented place or an apartment, which is where I am coming to, which is tier 2, tier 3 towns, where these apartments, or even if they have an apartment, getting a charger is not a problem, because that's a very close-knit apartment. It's not like Delhi, 100 apartments in a house or 50. Normally, if you go to tier 2, tier 3 town, it's 8 floors, 10 apartment buildings. So I feel the problem, whatever we discuss, is there when we think about 50% plus adoption, not 1%, 2%. Today we are at 1% car adoption. For 1%, 2%, 5%, 10%, there are at least 50% customers, that type of customers who don't need issues like range anxiety, charging. They have those things. And majority, like somebody said, 5% of the cars being used. You said that. That's a practical scenario. Even in Delhi, I fill my car once and drive at least 4 days, 5 days, and then go back to the charging, which is 400, 500 kilometers a normal car goes through. And if we have products like BYD is giving 400 kilometer or 500 kilometer range, why is there a range anxiety? Why is there a problem of a charging station every 5 kilometers? Today, petrol pumps are there every 200 meters, that's okay. Why? Because they have to cater to a clientele of what we sell 16 lakh per month. And if you talk of 10 years back, so it means we are talking of a very big clientele who are based on those petrol pumps. So that's the need and supply chain issue, not that it's 200 meters, so a petrol pump is an easier fuel than EV. So we don't need, so like same as CNG, there are no, if you talk about number of CNGs in India, so the number of CNG stations are prorational, okay with it. So I feel this is good. We should have our infrastructure ready for battery swapping, for charging station, everything. That is needed if you really want to electrify India from the mobility side. But today it's only talks. We need to have more options, like Sanjay ji said. We need to have Anirudh alone can't give that experience to all the customers who want to buy an electric vehicle. We need to have those display vehicles, those demo vehicles at some 8,000, 7,000 dealers across India to give that experience to, and to reach this kind of mass adoption. So unless and until all the manufacturers come forward, make the products, and make the products to a level where we can. So we are talking of four-wheelers. Even two-wheelers, we are not able to do that level because the all ICE big legacy players are not interested in to come into EV even today when they are already doing some 50, 60,000 per month, they are not. So unless and until the supply starts, the supply chain is agreed to have electrification and mass adoption, the customers or the dealers, we are just an onlooker. Let them make it, let them send it, then we'll 100% get that adoption, whatever you need.
Yeah, so I agree that a lot of tier 2, tier 3 or the Bharat as we call it is kind of aloof of the benefits, the experience of EV in general. But I would beg to differ on the two-wheeler point particularly, which is if you look at tier 2, tier 3 towns, they have been massive adopters of small two-wheelers and at least entry-level electric two-wheelers in that sense. And far, like in terms of density of those vehicles being sold in tier 2, tier 3 towns, is I think at par or higher than urban towns in that sense. I can share one personal example. I was traveling to Chikmagalur, which is a town couple of 100 kilometers away from Bangalore, right? And there are 10 electric two-wheeler dealerships on one single road in Chikmagalur. The amount of electric two-wheelers that I could see in that city was just beyond mind-boggling. Right? And similar stuff is what I hear back from my hometown in UP and what my father tells me, the kind of adoption or interest that is there. What we definitely need, as Vinkesh was mentioning, is about education of the customer, giving them experience and all of those things. But an Indian customer is very smart. Moment we have options in the 10 to 20 lakh category, they would very quickly do the math. See, if you look at 20 lakh plus cars are not sold in tier 2, tier 3 towns. So right now that customer doesn't even have an option. But moment we have the right range of, like the price range of vehicles available, that customer is very smart in realizing what is the TCO, what is the per kilometer cost. We do that math in India. And you will see massive, massive adoption. And tying back to the whole thing that, yes, he's right, absolutely. The bungalows is what the people with bungalows are what are buying cars in tier 2, tier 3 towns. Rarely do people live in apartments. So the challenge of destination charging will be far lower in tier 2 towns than in urban centers where there are huge apartments and either the apartment association is not ready to kind of put up charging stations or there are other kind of issues. Like I can tell you from our personal experience in Log 9, so we were setting up we got the permission to set up a charger in an apartment. This was for 3-wheelers. The association agreed and everything, but due to the recent fire incidents, one of the old ladies came in and she was completely paranoid of the vehicles catching fire in the basement of the building. And she made sure that we had to remove the charging station from there. All the capex had already been put in. So those are also challenges which have to be solved.
So one thing, Kavan, I forgot to give you the exact data, whatever. I'm not refuting what Akshay said. So May two-wheelers, we sold some 40,000 electric vehicle out of 12,22,000 vehicles, which means 3.2%, which means you can understand where the options are. Overall, we sold some 16 lakh vehicles in May, out of which 65,835 was electric vehicle, even including the e-rickshaws, which means only 4.1%. And one information, Akshay, so the low speed two-wheeler, which you see many dealerships across, they do only 10,000-15,000 per month. So the myth is that if we are doing 50,000 high-speed two-wheelers, they should be a lakh. But it is not like that. They are now become a normal, what you can say, that garage producers, a small shed and all, and they are not able to be present across a state or even across a region. So that's where the problem is. So I agree the low speed are giving the support and the numbers are good, but that are still very minuscule if I talk about percentage.
No, I think that's data, the facts lies in data. So for sure, but again, like you yourself said, the future is looking different. Yeah, and I think Vinkesh ji made a great point that for mass adoption, it's also important that, people can feel and touch the vehicles, wherever they are. So we need a lot more EV dealerships or dealerships to be, selling EV and putting that on display, testing it and all that. So clearly on that note, as I promised, we have some more time, 10, 15 minutes. Yeah.
I think one point which Vinkesh ji made,
Sure. So, but just maybe I just want to
Yeah.
let the audience know that you may please ask question after Sanjay has made his point. Yeah.
So
Can we have the mic there, please? Yeah.
So one point I think what there are like as he told that so many dealers opening up, but I think currently if you see we have whether it is two-wheeler, three-wheeler, passenger vehicle, we already have an existing set of huge number of dealers. Now with again every nook and corner there is a dealership putting up electric vehicle. I don't know how they're going to survive, especially with these kind of volumes. We know how difficult it is run to dealership, So, every day if 20 dealerships come up, after some time they might close down. So that is also a very important because the end customer will lose confidence on that. So the challenge or the easy route of adoption is that the existing dealers become stronger and they service the customers,
Sure.
and then because they have already a brand in that area and they can service. But if you see, the problem with two-wheeler and three-wheeler is every second day there is a new shop opening up, which may not survive for a long time. So that is also because that will destroy the concept of confidence.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's have some questions from the floor. We had, go ahead, please.
Good morning. My question is to Mr. Sanjay. As a vehicle company, offering vehicles, what is your advice on fast versus slow charging? So this question is from a consumer perspective, because I run both a Tigor as well as an MG. While none of the companies give a clear instruction on how many fast chargers or slow chargers, it's always a gray area. And I recently sold my Tigor because the battery conked off. As a company, what is your advice on fast versus slow charging? That's question one. The second question is, I also run a EV charger company. We make India's most affordable 3.3 kilowatt slow charger. And if I take a bid vehicle, say with a 70 kilowatt battery, this will take me around 20 hours to charge in slow charging. Now I live in Hyderabad in one of the most premium apartment communities where the contracted load, like Akshay was also mentioning, per apartment is 5 kilowatt, the contracted load. So if you are already running a fridge, a couple of ACs and whatnot in the house, there's no way the grid is ready. For that matter, forget the grid, I'll be penalized to cross the peak load, peak contracted load, if I just plug in a charger. Now, most of these apartments are actually promising a private, in their marketing, a private EV charger in each parking slot. With a 5 kilowatt contracted load, there's no way we can install any charger that is beyond 3.3 kilowatt. So the second question is, are we actually missing the sweet spot where we need a battery which is around 30-40 kilowatt with a 300 to 400 kilometer range and which can take the current charging at 3.3 kilowatt without loading the grid? Are we missing that sweet spot? Because MG is not there. 50 kilowatt is taking me 16 hours to charge. Tigor, too less a range. So are we missing the sweet spot?
Yeah.
And very clear answer, if possible, on fast versus slow, because that has been an eternal gray area from the manufacturers.
Sure. Thank you. Okay. So when we sell our vehicle, we only tell you can do any type of charging. There is no cycle required.
Okay.
So all our vehicles which are sold till now, 500 vehicles, everything people have done only fast charging. There has been no associate drop. There has been no cell drop because we make our own batteries.
Fair.
BYD makes own batteries. BYD makes own chips. BYD makes own semiconductors. Okay. So every our customer, even for fleet operators, for example, Blue Spot.
Arunji, could you share some data, especially if you have, because you have a fleet and large data, fast versus slow, how is the...
Sir, may I suggest that...
So all of the manufacturers whether it is MG, Tata, all of them instruct you have to do some amount of fast charging, some amount of slow charging. So that is there because they buy batteries from some other manufacturers. For us, we always tell you can do any amount of fast charging. Nothing is going to happen to the SOC drop or the cell chemistry. So that is very clear for us. We, as a manufacturer, we only provide 7.7 kilowatt charger. We don't provide a 3.3 with the vehicle because this is a 70 kilowatt. Globally, we have a lineup of, we have battery capacities ranging from 40 to 70. So depending upon the vehicle, we give the chargers based upon the capacity of the battery. So that is the global our this thing. And because of our battery technology, most of our vehicles have ranges starting from 350 to 780 kilometers. One of our premium vehicles globally has a range of 780 kilometers with a 80 kilowatt hour battery. So that's the kind of technology, because we have been doing battery research for the last 25 years globally, starting from mobile phones and then we went into cars. So that is my answer. So for our vehicles, we don't give a 3.3, we only give a 7.7. No, and of course, most of them are going in fleet. So they have a they have a fast charger which is already installed. So they go there and basically do their charging as of now. When we come into consumer vehicles, then we'll see how to, what vehicles we bring in and what kind of batteries we bring in. Then that's what we are planning as of now.
So that's kind of
I'll have to come in here because there are many other questions to be asked. May I suggest maybe over lunch or something you can connect on a one-on-one basis. Let's have others a chance. I saw a hand here being raised, please. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Dhari Gupta. I'm founder of Earthride. We are into EV leasing, two-wheelers. So my question is, like BYD is purely electric in India, but do you think that, we have seen this in two-wheelers, that if the electric two-wheeler has a very unique design, which actually electric technology allows you to do, so if manufacturers, especially manufacturers who are making petrol and diesel vehicles, if they manufactured electric vehicles which are purely electric and their diesel or petrol version is not available, maybe people buy it because of design, right? Like they might then convince themselves, no, range is enough for me. What we have seen now, like when ZS EV came, MG ZS EV, the Aster was not there. Like globally it was Aster and here they call it ZS EV. But now that Aster is there and Aster EV is there, now people compare that, petrol ka itta hai, diesel ka itta hai, does it make sense to buy the EV now? So if manufacturers decided that this vehicle will be launched only in electric and no petrol or diesel version, maybe that will drive sales?
Again, from a manufacturer perspective, we are the only company in the world to have a pure born EV platform. So our vehicles are coming on E3 platform, even the current vehicle which is there. Other manufacturers in India currently they are converting an IC platform into an EV platform. So we globally expect Tesla, we are also the company to have a born EV platform. All our EVs are on an EV platform. It is not an IC platform. We don't make IC engine vehicles globally also. We only sell EVs and hybrid vehicles. Yeah. So maybe Sudhir on commercial vehicles.
Yeah, I don't think you can push it only by design, because design is agnostic to vehicle. You can make a good design for an EV vehicle or you can make a good design for a conventional vehicle. And to expect an industry which has been around for 150 years to lay over and die is not going to happen. So I think design can be good in both. It doesn't matter. And it's not a question of and or. I mean, what we just spoke about, the penetration is so low that when you get to 30, 50%, all these things will matter. They don't matter at all now. And I think the biggest thing which was not discussed, and in some ways it was referred to, is actually availability. Is there any one manufacturer in the country which has stock of EV vehicles? The answer is no. So this is more an issue of the supply chain developing. We just don't have the supply chain to make the kind of vehicles that we are going. Again, the good thing is as a country we've decided we'll run ahead. So we are running ahead and then everybody is catching up. There's no charging infrastructure, there's no electricity, there is no power, there is no batteries, there is no chips, nothing. All of these will come. So I think at some point these will come. There's always going to be a point where something is going to be ahead of something else. But I think the again, the good positive part is despite so many people coming in, there is no availability of electric vehicles, and it is likely to remain so for at least the foreseeable future, because even when the cell plants come up, even when the capacities come up, they're going to be much behind demand, at least for the next 5 years. And when they come, then there's a global demand. So this is, in that sense, it's a question of capacity. Supply chains is a much more important issue, which of course was not the topic of today's discussion.
So practically, in my opinion, when we talk of 2030 and we talk of 30%, 5%, 10%, what I feel, even today when you go to a dealership to buy a car, you get three options: CNG, petrol, diesel. LPG is not there, but it was some time before also. So once 5 years down the line, you will have EV also. So it is in the same model or not, it doesn't make a difference. Creta has a petrol and diesel both. 700 has. So everybody, so fuel is your choice. And going further, whatever customer demands, whatever customer agrees to, will be where the manufacturer would put their eggs in that basket. So maybe 5 years down the line, you will have all kind of fuel in the similar type of car. As of today, you cannot differentiate a Creta from a Seltos. It's similar product. But then too, somebody likes a Seltos and somebody likes a Creta. So fuel would make a difference, but not today, 5 years down the line. Designs would be Me Too product. You cannot make a difference going further. It was 10 years back, but 5 years from down the line, everybody would be making a similar product because of the regulations of pollution norms, the safety norms, and the design norms. So
yeah, just to add one more thing there, I understand that your point of view comes mainly from a marketing standpoint, where you want to create a differentiated brand positioning, wherein you don't want the consumer to be able to compare it to something else and therefore say that this is more or less, and this is a unique piece in its own and it stands alone on it, by itself. And that's a very interesting way to position a product, I agree. However, there is also the entire question of unit economics of manufacturing and so on and so forth, right? So if you're only going to make EVs, then you would need to, make all your investments and all your fixed costs. For example, you don't benefit from the scale of manufacturing, right? For example, the number of diesel variants of the Nexon that you would sell and the petrol variants, they all come from the same production line, right, ultimately. And you're only making some components different. These are, unlike BYD, they're not like ground up electric, right? There is a variant, and manufacturers are able to, amortize that cost over so many more units. So that is going to be a differentiator that, probably doesn't work out in your favor. So maybe that makes a difference.
Okay, we have time for one final question, right? Okay. Yes, sir. Go ahead, please.
Investment banker always look at, which is the one to punt on. And obviously, being early investors in Blue Smart, thank you. I think good job done. We continue to support you. My piece is with respect to one big challenge which I face, and why I look at, obviously, PwC can be the lead in terms of, see, the way many industries have had challenge doing a midstream correction in terms of creating quality standards, We don't want this industry because this industry has huge opportunities. And I think that's where we as professionals and as corporates need to come together to create something which can be truly looked at from every angle, not just from consumers, from obviously investors, from the manufacturers or the companies which are getting into. What's the piece with respect to that? Is there some real thinking, real thought, though it is an evolving, innovative space? But I think that's one opportunity which we need to correct now versus trying to do it at a later stage, because then it becomes difficult, as also multiple complexities comes in, the issues with respect to infrastructure, with respect to, what to buy, what not to buy, and where to set up what, I think creates multiple issues. So I think there is a big piece here, which leaders such as you who have created thought papers, I think needs to put that together now, and we are ready to support if some of those come up. So what's some perspective on that?
No, absolutely. I think one thing I must say is our government has been very proactive in this. Like, look at the battery swapping policy or the charging policy. I mean, there's been a lot of thinking and a lot of debate and workshops and all that engagement has happened. But finally, see, we are also have to balance competitive, pressures that companies may have, right? If everything is standardized, then, that's one concern that they have, that, how am I going to address that? But, it's a natural process. Whenever a new technology comes in, there is always a debate on what's the standard and how should we do it and all that. And then there are concerns, how am I going to protect my IP, what is in it for me and all that. And that's where I believe the government and, more objective think tanks, companies, who are industry thought leaders, observers, I think they have to play a role. So absolutely, and a lot of it is happening as well, but it's like a journey. I don't think we are going to have a scene where there won't be chaos. The only way to development of a market is through chaos and building things up. One by one, we keep resolving. As he was saying, one thing will be behind. Now we have the demand. People have finally caught up and there is demand, but there is supply constraints, right? And I do a lot of work with auto component guys, and they are still thinking, hey, I have to go ahead and make a big investment basis EV. But, when I talk to my OEMs, they're still telling me, I don't know kitna hoga. I can't give you a firm production plan or, how much I will do 5 years from now. So there are a lot of questions, and that's the process of developing. So I don't think just coming out with standards is really going to address that. But having that ongoing government, industry, stakeholder dialogue, and really stitching a clear roadmap of how we are going to build further on the EV journey is the crucial piece. There are some elements of it, but I think a lot more needs to be done, in my opinion. Yeah.
Can I add
please.
comment over here? I think one of the most important things that we need to do as a ecosystem in general is to avoid analysis paralysis. We in India have a habit of thinking a lot and doing very little. And that's the reason we typically miss multiple buses on various technologies, whether it is in the EV industry or anything else. If you really believe in it, go for it, build it out, and then make a market for your product, rather than just thinking about it. That is one. And second thing is that if we don't want too much government intervention, because government intervention will lead to regulations, will lead to standardization, which is not good for growth of any innovative industry. It is imperative on the industry itself to be cautious in the choices that they are making. Unless and until, as long as the industry will try to basically use the customer as a test base and say that, okay, we'll put a product out and see what happens, right? Then obviously the government will have to intervene. Then you will have more regulations than required. You will have more standardization, which will kill more innovation. And that's not good for the ecosystem. So these are two most important things on this perspective.
So you can see right away there's a differing opinion, and when you add more to the industry. Exactly. See, but that's the whole point, See, if I bring 5 different people, all OEMs, right?
Yeah.
If I get them on a panel and ask them a question, are you willing to standardize, your entire process and, and go, I don't think we'll get an easy consensus yet. Yeah. And that's the whole journey. What I'm saying is one needs to, go through it. It's not going to happen top down, Absolutely, the industry consensus has to happen with various forums, SIAM, FADA, the component suppliers forum. Of course, see, one thing which is, like you rightly mentioned, the financing piece is, in my opinion, maybe Vinkesh ji, you have an opinion there, but it's not totally, integrated. And that we need to do as well. Yeah.
True.
I'll ask you one single question. What is the waiting period in ICE vehicle today?
What is the waiting period in?
ICE vehicles today? We have a 4 months waiting period. Means we are selling 3 lakh vehicles and the booking is around 9 to 11 lakhs. And think about an OEM. Should he invest in improving the production capacity of ICE where the dealers are carrying the booking, or should he invest in an electric vehicle? I don't know. People like him will always want EV. I'm okay with that.
I think the real question is,
as per dealer, I will like my OEM to invest in ICE where the customer is waiting and I can earn out of it.
I think
won't want
this panel is going to go on for another
which
hour.
I don't know when will it come.
I think the real question is that you want to be on the left side of the Tesla versus everybody else's graph, or you want to be on the right side. But it's not, that's the problem. We always keep on thinking short term and not long term. Whether we want to kind of be the winners or the leaders in the market, or we want to die a painful death. That is the
That
real
is what I'm saying.
question
That's
between the
confusion
automotive industry.
with the OEM. That's the biggest confusion today. Why is not two-wheeler bigger manufacturer these coming into EV? Because they have a capacity of 8 lakh vehicle per month. And if they as a company start promoting EV, what will happen to that capacity where they have invested billions? So that is a problem every manufacturer, ICE manufacturer is going through. BYD is lucky. They are all EV. So it's easier for them. But think about people who have invested, what, 50 years, $1 billion, and made that capacity today. You want them to wipe it off and shift to an assembler of an electric vehicle where normally OEMs are not making anything. They are just assembling.
We have a general tendency of milking the old cow on and on. So that's a bigger problem.
That was a very interesting panel discussion. We've run out of time, but Dr. Mehta, final comment and then we close.
Yeah, I think we are making it more dramatic than it needs to be. There is, again, we can keep speaking all of this, but there is room for both of these to grow. The ICE industry invested hundreds of thousands of crores in Euro 6. So clearly, they have to recover those investments. There are new players coming in who don't have that legacy, who want to come in and come with new technology. We are still at 1% penetration, for God's sake. So, I mean, there is so much room to go. So many of these questions are, frankly, don't matter. Because the important thing is both will grow. And the most exciting thing is the Indian auto market is growing. The global auto market for EVs is growing. So there is room for everybody to come in and have a play in this, which is what eventually matters. And the final point is, today Tesla makes more money than General Motors. So there is also money to be made at the end of it.
Yeah, it's always an ongoing battle between the past and the future. So Vinkesh ji, one of the reasons Tesla has great valuation is because it's the future. And what you very rightly said, I mean, clearly the OEMs want to recover their investments. They want to make money on what is already put in. So they are going to, in some sense, block and tackle, to protect their existing investment. But very interesting panel discussion, and I think the contrary opinion really made it more exciting. So thank you very much. And I think we really had a good time. The discussions will continue, I think, over lunch and other areas. So thank you again for all the panelists, and you've been a wonderful audience. Thank you so much.